Hi, this is Margaret Maloney, and welcome to the Death Dhamma podcast. Together we will consider life, death, and impermanence. Because in between birth and death, we lose things. Not just our glasses and our keys. We lose identities, relationships, ideas, and more. But what we can gain right now is facing this together, and we will gain freedom, peace, and progress on our path. Welcome back, my friends. And this is episode 2. Now, often I'll do, a special episode with someone followed by lessons learned. And this time I'm doing things a little bit differently because in my conversation with Mahesi Caplan, there came a time where he had given us some great foundation about his background and his experiences with Buddhism and his thoughts around breathing, breath meditation, and the inner breath versus the outer breath, and experiencing luminosity. And I hope that we all had a taste of how that can really help us with impermanence and ultimately death. And then just as we were starting to wrap up our time together, he said something about death, about what he really thought about death. And to me, this felt like something that really needed to be isolated and focused on. And that's what I bring you today. Thanks for listening.
It's an outrageous thing to say, but in the last kind of decades or so of my life, I kept having this thought, there is no death.
Okay.
Yeah, so obviously the body dies, but
right
from the Buddhist side of things, as this capacity for presence increases, grows, the sort of idea of death loses the terror that often we associate with it. So, I did used to feel a lot of fear around death. And I used to feel a lot of fear looking up at the night sky. I would feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, that changed during an all-night sitting. We used to do these all-night meditations in the monastery. I remember going out about 4 a.m. or something after probably sitting for 4 or 5 hours. I looked up at the night sky. My mind must have been very clear and very sort of expanded because, I experienced the universe as being inside of my mind as opposed to me being an isolated entity inside of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So when I experienced it as being inside of my mind, there was no fear. There was just the beauty of what was there.
Okay.
But without the notion of separation as an isolated entity having to face this sort of enormous situation that can feel so overwhelming. And so when I say, I guess there is no death, there is this kind of sense of the body, when worked on in the way that I describe, it just becomes more and more and more porous. So you just got to think of it as it just becomes so porous that, you no longer feel bound in it as in the way that we generally feel bound in it.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense of sort of being connected, you could say, to the ocean that is the mother of the wave, then the concern about the disappearance of the wave doesn't impact you in the same way as it would if you thought that you were just the wave alone, and that the disappearance of the wave from that point of view seems like annihilation. You can't imagine.
But it's not.
You can't imagine, where you would be, what you would be, how you would be from the point of view of a wave looking out at other waves. But from the point of view of the ocean, experiencing yourself as a wave from the point of view of the ocean, you have a direct understanding of what occurs when the wave disappears. And there is a remainder.
The separation, when we have that sense of separation, which I feel is, driven by the ego trying to stay alive, the more that I have that sense of separation, potentially, the more fear I'm going to have.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to maintain this thing that I think is an isolated thing.
Yeah.
But when I start letting go of the separation and I began to see myself as not myself, but part of this everything, for lack of a better term, then I can get to that place of understanding it's not really a death, it's a rejoining. It's a
rejoining, yeah.
It's a rejoining.
So you've already, in a sense, started to dissolve the boundaries of the body way ahead of its actual dissolution, physical dissolution, through your spiritual work. So as the body ages, gradually, in a sense, going towards its actual, the physical dissolution, is kind of in accord with and in keeping with this process of gradual transitioning into this sort of different way of being, which is, in a sense, is our true home.
Yes.
And so the whole aging process of the body is not experienced as something that is as brutal and as cruel as we often understand it, you know, something to be resisted, but it's understood to be, you know, in a sense, a kind of compassionate process of expansion that's in keeping with.
It has to happen for me to be part of what I really am, So if I think of like the wave analogy, you know, and you think like the wave starting way back, way offshore somewhere, right? And that's the new wave. And then you know, as the wave grows and moves along, and as we get closer to the shore, you could even make a case for the wave even mimicking, in some of us, older age, because like the wave starts to get bent over and parts of it get thinner and weaker because it becomes a lesser wall of water, and eventually it crashes on the shore. And some waves go way up the beach, but some don't. But eventually they all come back into the ocean.
That's right. And
that's us.
You know, I mean, another way of looking at it that I find quite useful is that I reflect on quite often is, you know, this world that we find ourselves in is really a foreign land. It's like we're on holiday somewhere else, you know, and when you know what it's like when you're on holiday somewhere else, it's incredibly interesting, but at the same time, it can be quite stressful because you're not at home, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
It doesn't have the same quality as being at home. Doesn't mean to say you're not enjoying the holiday, but there's always this sort of background thing of, you know,
I need to be home.
Home is a place of rest, you know, and this journey of being a human being is not our true home. This is a phrase that Ajahn Chah used. You know, so in a sense, I think of it as an excursion that we were on, but with the benefit of in a sense what refuge is, or what sanctuary is, or what this legitimate need that we all have for safety. And this is probably something I should have said at the outset, because essentially that's what Buddhism is about. It's about saying we all have a legitimate need for safety. Until that need is met, we're all going to be a little bit crazy.
Truth.
So, and Buddhism is saying, well, there is a legitimate experience of safety to be found. And so once you begin to recognize and experience directly this, your true home, while on your excursion, in a sense, then, you know, at a certain point, you're like every holiday, you reach a point where you say, oh, I'm ready to go back.
You're ready to go home, as opposed to where you go through the discomfort and then you finally think you get it. You finally think you fit in, and then you resist going home. Oh, I don't want to go. I just got used to living here. Oh, I just got used to the weather, whatever it is, right? Why do I have to go home? But if we can just recognize that I'm a visitor and I am meant to go home. Beautiful. You've been listening to the Death Dhamma podcast with your host, Margaret Maloney. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmaloney.com, margaretmeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.